Hello everyone, Amy R here from Prairie Paper and Ink, and I have a couple cards to share with you guys using a bunch of the new products from Tonic's Woodland Walk collection. So to start off with, I have some B watercolor paper here that is 6 by 9 inches, so I cut it in half, so I get two pieces that are perfect for like card front size, like A2 card size, with a little bit of leeway so I can trim them down later. And I use my anti-static powder tool on them first. And I'm going to stamp Simon Says Stamp's Outline Leaves background onto these. And my usual MO with all heat embossing backgrounds usually is to use white embossing powder. So I had my Nuvo white embossing powder sitting here. And then I remembered that I have the golden sunflower embossing powder from the collection. And I was like, that's technically perfect to use with like leaf images. And I was also curious, I was like, I wonder what this would look like with the shimmer powders, you know, because it's all meant to go together, so why not? So that's what I used. So I stamped the background with the clear embossing ink, and then I coated it with the embossing powder. And I'm going to do both backgrounds with the same embossing powder. And then once they're coated, I let my heat tool heat up for a little bit, and then I'm going to melt all of this embossing powder and do that with both backgrounds. So now I have these leaves with the golden sunflower embossing powder, and just that alone, I was like, this is really pretty. But I am going to add shimmer powder because that was the thing I was most excited about with this release. So I have the golden sparkler and falling leaves shimmer powder, and this is my favorite way to use the shimmer powders is to sprinkle them onto heat embossed backgrounds and then spray them with water and see what happens. So I'm going to use both of these shimmer powders, one on each, just because I wanted to see how they would work. And always with the shimmer powders, do not squeeze the bottle. I tap it very lightly with my finger. Don't squeeze it. You'll end up with a ton will come out. And you don't need very much. Like, I'm fairly liberal with it. You can always add more. This was one of the few times I didn't. I really wanted to just leave it as is. Like, I sprinkled on the powder. I'm misting it fairly heavily with water. I let it sit for a minute, and then I'm just going to set both of these aside and let them dry. I'm not going to fiddle with them. I'm not going to move things around with my fingers. Well, like, you know, I will usually mess with these forever and add layers and layers and layers. But I really wanted to let them just do their own thing this time. So that's what I did. And then once they're dry, I'm turning the flashlight on my phone here so you can get an idea of the shimmer. Golden Sparkler is aptly named. It has golden shimmer. The Falling Leaves has a green reflective shimmer to it. It's just so pretty. Love. So these have completely dried. So now I can actually do something with them. So I cut them down with some rectangle dies, and then I actually die cut circles out of them. I will use the circles later on with these cards. And then I also cut down some of the classic cardstock from Tonic, the tan brown and the grass green from the same collection. And it's the textured cardstock that is a little bit lighter weight. So I'm going to use that cardstock as the backing to these backgrounds, but I also die cut it as the backing to the sentiments. And because it's a little bit lighter weight of a cardstock, I die cut 3 of them. I'm using the Big Thanks wafer die from Simon, and I am stacking these die cuts together with Nuvo's Deluxe Adhesive. So I have 3 layers of the classic cardstock die cut. And then I'm going to top these with the Tonic Mirror cardstock that comes with this, or not comes with, but is also part of this collection. So this one with the tan brown cardstock, I'm going to top with the Rustic Dusk die cut. Just very reflective and just love. And I also, with these die cuts, I really prefer stacking them this way. It just gives them so much more weight and just dimension and way more sturdy as well. Like, they really kind of start to take center stage with cards. So I did that. And then I'm just going to repeat the exact same process with the grass green cardstock. Die cut it 3 times, stacked all 3 layers together. And then the top layer is the Flourishing Green mirror card. And this one has the more satin finish, so it's not as reflective. So got those all stacked together. And then to complete my sentiments, I'm just using little tiny sentiments from the Big Thanks Words stamp set from Simon. And I pulled out the the Woodland Walk hybrid ink pack. Now, these are new to me. I've never used Tonic's hybrid inks before. Standard hybrid inks, they're great for anything, especially if you want like crisp images, etc. They're very juicy, I will say that. I was using such teeny little sentiments, you know, that are like so small. I had to not be as heavy-handed as I normally am when I'm inking up sentiments. Like this first one, I like smushed the ink pad right onto it, totally unnecessary. And I was like, oh, there's a lot of ink in this little ink pad. So gently tap my sentiment to the ink pad and kind of use up some of that excess ink there. And I stamped it a couple times until I was happy with how the sentiment looked. So I did one color for one card and I used another color for the other card, just stamping those sentiments. And then I'm going to die cut them with little sentiment labels, wafer dies from Simon as well. And off camera, I actually stamped more sentiments and die cut that I will use on the inside of the card, but I'll get to that in a minute. So now that I've got everything, you know, die cut and cut down, etc., and stacked together, it's time to start like actually adhering everything together. So I'm going to adhere my shimmer background to their coordinating cardstock. So with the golden sparkler, I paired that with the tan brown textured cardstock. So I got that into place, and then I'm going to adhere my die cut sentiment and then my little sentiment strip. And all the sentiment strips, I'm going to trim the edges down straight with my guillotine trimmer, which I've shown in tons of videos. I just hold the little sentiment strip in place and then just give it a little tap with the palm of my hand, and it just trims it off perfectly so everything is squared away straight the way it should be. So I trimmed down all the sentiments that I had stamped and die cut for these cards. And then once I get everything adhered into place, I am going to adhere these to my card bases. So adhering everything with the Nuvo adhesive, just keeping everything adhered flat. I did think about using foam tape. I thought about adding like a ton of dimension, but I decided since I was going to be stacking the sentiment, plus I'm going to add, of course, Nuvo drops and everything. So I'm going to be adding dimension that way, not to add a ton of foam tape and make these like extra bulky sorts of cards. So got everything adhered and just kind of following the same layout with both cards since that's where I decided to die cut the circles, etc. So after that's adhered, I can use the same adhesive and I'm going to adhere these to my card bases, which are heavyweight white cardstock, standard A2 size cards. So 4 1/4 by 11 scored at 5.5. So they're 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch cards. And once I've got my card fronts adhered, I'm going to use the circles or partial circles from die cutting the shimmer backgrounds. I'm going to use those on the inside of my cards because one, I always have to finish the inside. Two, you know, waste not, want not. But also after doing that, I was like, in the end, those could have been clean and more clean and simple card fronts. You could just stamp sentiments on the inside of the cards, that'd be great. And then use these circles on the outside of cards. That would totally work. So to finish them, I pulled out a piece of vellum and I'm going to stamp another sentiment from the big thanks words, just another word of thanks. Even though it says thanks on the outside, I was like, why not say thanks on the inside? You can never say thank you enough, in my opinion. So I'm going to stamp this a couple times with that same clear embossing ink. I'm going to use the golden sunflower embossing powder again. So just pouring that over, tapping off the excess, melt this with my heat tool, which takes no time at all on vellum. Embossing powder melts extremely quickly on vellum, so you have to pay attention that you don't burn anything, etc. So melted that, cut these down into strips, and then to adhere them onto the inside of my cards, I'm just going to run these through my little Xyron X little sticker maker. So that just applies adhesive to the entire back of these little vellum strips so that you won't actually see any of the adhesive. And I just press everything down really well with my bone folder just to make sure all the adhesive is pressed onto the back of the vellum, as well as the excess is on the little release paper, so I don't have any like sticky edges or anything like that. So now I've got my little die cut partial circles here, and I can just press those sentiments right into place. And then once those are pressed into place, I can just flip these over, trim off the excess with my scissors, and then you can't see the adhesive through the vellum at all. And then I'm going to also adhere those other sentiments that I had stamped and trimmed down as well, just to finish off like the whole theme of these cards. So get those into place, trim those down, and then I can adhere the little sentiment strips with the Nuvo adhesive. Once those are adhered, I'll be able to adhere these onto the inside of the card. So now I've got everything adhered, lined up, straight. Always use my grid mat for that because again, I've got like slight OCD tendencies. So now I can actually get these adhered, again, using just the deluxe adhesive and adhering each circle that coordinates with the card front onto the insides of the cards. And then as my final bit of embellishment, I'm using a couple of the crystal drops that coordinate with this collection, only one on each. I thought about using like all the colors, but I'm going to keep it a little bit more simple. So with the green card, I am using the soft mint crystal drops. And then with the kind of golden sparkler card, I'm using the dirty bronze crystal drops. And I just like to apply them in, you know, varying little sizes, all somewhat in a triangular fashion, and usually in odd numbers. Just, you know, it looks better that way in my opinion. And then once they're applied, I like to tap my cards against, I'm just tapping them against the container of embossing powder. That just giving it a nice good thwack a few times, it really helps to smooth out the Nuvo drops, makes them a little bit thinner, smooths them out, they may look a little more like enamel dots. And also if there are any bubbles, it's rare, but if there are, that helps bring them to the surface, and then I can just remove that. You know, either it pops on its own or I can just, you know, pop the bubble with a pin and it's good to go. So then all I have to do is let these Nuvo drops dry and these cards are finished. So as always, there will be links below the video to the blog post, supply list with links to everything, so you can check that out below if you're interested. Thank you all so much for watching and subscribing and thumbs upping and commenting on my videos. I really, really appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye.